Okay, so last Monday we discussed on the basic law of demand. Okay, price goes up, quantity goes down for normal goods. Okay, and then and how do you derive the demand curve, and also the which is okay. So this is the one that we discussed. Okay, from this slide. Okay, the general demand curve. Okay, and then how do you arrive at the market demand? Okay, by adding all the individual demand at the same price, you're going to get the total quantity demanded. Okay, for all of the customers, the buyers at that particular price. Okay, so that is how you arrive at demand schedule. Okay, the market demand schedule. Okay, and then how you get the market demand curve by adding all individual demand. Okay, and then you can arrive at the market demand curve. I also explained in detail, okay, the difference between change in demand versus change in quantity demanded. Okay, the word quantity demanded. Okay, versus the concept in terms of the change in demand. Okay, so so this is the focus from last class. Okay, so you need to know what is the difference between change in demand versus change in quantity demanded. Okay, change in demand involves shifting the demand curve to the right or to the left, but change in quantity demanded is only involving movement along the curve, meaning only the price of the good that changes. Okay, but change in demand is due to factors other than the price of the good. Okay, for example, the price of okay, about your income, whether your income increase or decrease, your consumer preference, your taste. Okay, the price of substitute and complementary. So this one I already discussed last class. Okay, the number of buyers, the more customers, the more buyers in the market, the higher will be the demand. So demand will shift to the right. Expectation about future price. If you expect that the price in the future to increase, so the customer will buy more now to avoid paying more in the future. Or if the customer expect the price in the future to fall, so the customer will postpone or will not buy now. They will pay or buy later when the price actually becomes cheaper. So demand today will fall. Okay, so changes in this, okay, will cause the demand curve to shift to the right or to the left, depending on which factor you are looking at. If the price of substitute and complementary, so this one we already discussed also in detail last class. Okay, the cost and the effect. Okay, so that will be the cost will be the substitute price, the effect will be the price of the quantity, the demand of the good that we want to examine. Okay, so check back the lecture from last class. Okay, so today we are just going to discuss the second part on chapter 3, which is on supply. But basically, once you understand the general concept on demand, supply will be the first few sections will be quite similar. Okay, only this time we are looking at the perspective of the seller, okay, rather than the customer. Okay, so the willingness and the ability still the same, but rather than the buyer, this one become the seller lah, okay, to buy and offer at different price, okay, at a specific time period. Okay, so this is important because we want to analyze the supply curve during at specific time, okay, at one particular point of time. Okay, so the law of supply for normal goods, the higher the price, the more will be supplied. Okay, so for general items or normal items, okay, normal goods that people that you usually buy in the grocery store, okay, in supermarket, okay, so it will follow the general rule of positive relationship between price and quantity. For demand, law of demand, it will be the negative relationship between price and quantity. Price goes up, quantity goes down for demand. Okay, but for supply, we expect that it will be positive. So Because of that, the supply curve will be upward sloping. Okay, the higher the price, the more quantity will be supplied. Okay, so same as demand, we can also produce the supply schedule, meaning when you add every individual supplier in the market, you can arrive at the market supply curve. So there's nothing different from the demand side, okay, except that the supply curve is upward sloping versus the demand curve is downward sloping. Okay, so the focus for this part will be the difference between quantity supplied versus change in quantity supplied versus change in supply. Okay, just like in the demand, change in demand versus change in quantity demanded. Okay, so anything that beside the price of the good itself, that will cause what we call change in supply, meaning it will cause the supply curve to shift, okay, whether downwards, okay, to the right, or it can shift to the left, okay, to the left, meaning supply decrease. Okay, so supply increase, the curve will shift to the right. Okay, supply decrease, the curve will shift to the left. So anything, so the factors listed here, okay, can cause both whether increase or decrease. Okay, whether in technology, improvement in technology, the price of other goods, number of sellers, expectation of future. So some of these are quite similar. For example, like this one, okay, expectation of future price. Okay, but the rest I think will be different than in the demand factor. Okay, technology is not in the demand. Number of sellers in the customer, we have the number of buyers. So basically, it's quite the same. The more sellers in the market, the more quantity will be supplied. Okay, tax and subsidy from the government, government restriction like quota. Okay, limitation meaning, for example, the government restrict. Okay, one seller can only sell certain number of items. Okay, so that can also change the amount of supply available in the market. Okay, so we go to the first one first. Change in supply, I mean the factor that can cause the supply curve to shift to the right, okay, given by the factors as now. Okay, for example, a change to the right. Okay, so what will cause? So basically, this slide is comparing the movement, the shifting in the curve because of these factors. Okay, or simply change in quantity supplied, meaning movement along the curve. Okay, so if you understand the concept of change in quantity demanded from the demand side, okay, the same principle applies for the supply, meaning the word quantity supplied, ED, refers to movement along, meaning you're only looking at the price of the good itself. The more the price, the higher the price, the more quantity supplied. So it will be the goods own price, okay, not the price of other goods. Okay, if you recall from our last week lecture, last Monday lecture, okay, I used the example of Samsung A52 model, okay, handphone or smartphone. So if you are looking at this model alone, so that this price will be the price of this model and the quantity of this model, okay, not the price of Vivo model, for example, as what we discussed last Monday. Okay, so that changes in the price of A52 will cause movement along, what we call as change in quantity supplied. Okay, but other than the price of A52, okay, for example, any of these factor changes, the price of input or resources, technology changes, the price of other goods means the competitor price. Okay, for example, the price of substitute, okay, like Vivo, for example. So number of sellers. So this can cause the demand to shift to the right or to the left. Okay, so of course this is not discussed in detail. Okay, so you can get more of this description maybe in some other books. Okay, so you need to do a bit of revision on the supply side. Okay, for example, I can just explain briefly here, technology. Okay, I think certain factors you can use your own logic rather than having to rely on the book to explain. Okay, for example, like technology. Okay, we know that technology is supposed to make the production becomes cheaper. Okay, you can produce more at the less time. For example, the use of computer nowadays. Okay, so computer is supposed to shorten or minimize the time that you need to do the same job maybe 5 years ago. Okay, or for example, the use of robots or mechanical, or any machines in the factory. Okay, any advancement in technology is supposed to allow the company or firms, okay, or producer to produce more at the same time, okay, using maybe less cost, but you can produce more. So technology, increase in technology will cause supply to shift to the right, meaning more will be supplied. Okay, price of other goods. Okay, for example, if the price of substitute, okay, for example, the price of the competitors, for example, if you're talking about A52 just now, of Samsung model. So let's say the price of other goods, let's say the model by Vivo. Okay. I'm just using the same example like last Monday. So Vivo will be the price of other goods. So if the price of Vivo, for example, goes up, okay. So what will this happen to the quantity supply, the supply of 52? Okay, you will expect A52 also to increase, because if the price of Vivo goes up, okay, supplier, the Samsung A52 supplier expect that maybe perhaps some people might want to buy more of A52 because now it becomes cheaper compared to Vivo. Okay, so the price of Vivo goes up, the quantity supply, the supply of A52 is expected to increase. So supply of A52 is expected to increase, meaning shifting to the right. Okay, number of sellers, the more sellers join the market, okay, meaning that the number of good supplied will also be increased. Okay, just like if you go to Shopee or Lazada, if you want to search for one item or certain brand, you will see that the more sellers in the market, meaning that the more quantity will be offered or supplied in the market. So number of sellers increase, supply will also increase. Okay, expectation about future price. This is quite similar to the consumer side, but in reverse, meaning if seller expect future price to increase, okay, if seller expect the price in the let's say in next month, now is the month of April, or today is 1st April, okay, so let's say in the month of May, okay, which might coincide with the Idul Fitri or the Eid celebration, okay, for Muslim. Okay, so certain items might be in high demand, so the price might expect to increase. So what will happen to the supply today? Okay, so supply today might fall, okay, might shift to the left, because if seller expect price in the future to increase, so supplier might want to sell less now, okay, because they might want to sell more when the price actually increase in the month of May during celebration season. Okay, so expectation, if the price is expected to increase in the future, so less will be supplied now. Okay, but if the seller expect the price in the future to drop, okay, to fall in the future, so in the future, if the seller expect the price to fall, so what will happen today? Today, seller might want to sell more, because if they don't sell more now, in the future the price is expected to fall, then they will get less revenue lah, less profit. Okay, so to avoid that, they might want to sell more now if they expect that the price in the future to fall. So what you analyze is always what will happen today. So if they expect the future price to drop, today more will be sold. Okay, if they expect that the price of future to increase in the future, so today less will be sold because they want to sell more in the future. Okay, the same with tax and subsidies. Okay, if the government gives subsidy is supposed to what? To reduce the cost of production. So subsidy increase, supply will also increase. Okay, but tax is the other way around. Tax will increase the cost of production. Okay, because tax you need to pay to the government. Subsidy the government gives to you. So increase in tax will cause supply to fall. Okay, meaning that the supply curve will shift to the left. Okay, so increase in tax, supply will fall, meaning the supply curve will shift to the left. Okay, the same as government restriction. If the government restrict the quantity of certain item that can be sold, so supply will also decrease lah. It will also fall. Okay, so these are the factors. You can use your own logical reasoning actually to understand this. Okay, when the supply increase, or supply fall. Okay, but the main thing is to understand the difference between change in quantity supply versus change in supply. Okay, change in quantity supply is just movement along the curve of the goods own price lah. Okay, so that is similar to what we learned in the demand section. Okay, and next, okay, we look at market equilibrium. Okay, so let me see. Okay, tak banyak lah. Okay. Okay, so in market equilibrium is basically when the demand and supply intersect, okay, or the consumer in the consumer demand curve, okay, the consumer market demand curve and the supplier supply curve, okay, reach an equilibrium point. Okay, so in terms of graphical approach or mathematics, okay, when you draw the graph is when the two lines intersect. So the intersection point is what we call the equilibrium point lah. Okay, so if you were to do this in terms of mathematics, okay, if you write the equation, let's say demand and supply, okay, so in economics we write demand function as QD, okay, demand supply function as QS. So the word equilibrium is when the two equation is equal. The equation or the function or the equation for demand is equal to the function of supply. So the word equal means equilibrium, okay? Or when you plot the graph is when the two graphs intersect, okay, in the middle here. Okay, so that is what it means by equilibrium. Okay, in terms of graphics, the two lines intersect, or in terms of mathematics or equation, when the demand function is equal to the supply function. Here lah. Okay, so this is just the simplest way to highlight or to illustrate how market price is determined. Okay, of course, when you go to the market, okay, you look at the price of fish, the price of vegetable, the price of or any goods that you go and see in the market. Of course, you cannot see the actual graph. Okay, but whatever price that the seller decide to sell in the market, okay, whether online platform like in Shopee, Lazada, or Facebook, okay. So whatever price that the seller decide to put is basically based on the market demand and supply interaction. So the seller will not simply put the price that does not make sense. Okay. So the price that the seller wants to sell must also represent what the customer wants to buy or wants to pay. Okay, the seller cannot put the price too low or too high. Too low meaning that you are not making enough profit. But if they're selling too high, meaning people will not buy your product. So the price that the seller decide to put to sell that particular product in the market is based on this interaction, demand and supply. Okay, if the price is deemed too high, okay, it's considered very high. So that's why sometimes you see that the seller will give sale or discount, okay, just to attract people to buy more because the current price might be a bit too high. If the price is considered a bit too low, meaning that people buy a lot, then the seller might want to increase the price because people can, if the price start to increase, then the seller can make more profit, but also it will also discourage people from buying more lah. So whatever price that you see in the market is basically based on the interaction between demand and supply. Okay, so and in economy you have the situation where what we call as excess supply or excess demand. Okay, so this is excess in supply. Okay, and below here is the word excess in demand. Okay, excess demand. Okay, excess supply or excess demand. Why? Because if you are looking at the area above the demand curve, above the equilibrium, supply is on the right, demand is on the left, meaning supply is more than the demand. Okay, but if you're looking at the price point below the equilibrium, here demand will be on the right, supply will be on the left, or demand will be bigger than the supply. So demand is more than supply, we call it excess in demand. Demand is more than supply. But here on above the equilibrium price, we call it excess supply, meaning supply is higher than the demand. So when you have excess supply, market, okay, so market will adjust itself, okay, meaning that the price will start to go down because this is where you see people like giving sale or discount. Okay, for example, if you used to go to Shopee, for example, Okay, Shopee is always, they always have sale for every month. I mean, for example, in the month of April, it will be 4th of April. Last month, it will be the 3rd of March. Okay, in February, it will be the 2nd of February. So it always be the same date as the month lah, for their so-called sale. Okay, so when the price is considered too high or supply is higher than demand, so seller will start to reduce the price. Okay, so that when they sell lower, demand will start to increase. Okay, demand will start to increase, and this excess in supply will become smaller and smaller until there is no more excess in supply. Okay, the same thing as if you have excess in demand. If the price is considered too cheap, okay, or too low, okay, meaning demand is higher than supply, so what will happen is that supplier will tend to increase the price lah, okay, to get more profit. And as price start to increase, demand will start become smaller and smaller lah, until this excess in demand is no longer exist. So you always go back to the equilibrium. So the interaction between demand and supply will make sure that any excess in supply or any excess in demand will not be too long or will not be there for too long. Okay, kalau ada pun maybe just for temporary period only. Okay, any excess in supply will force the price to go down and eliminate any excess supply. Same goes with excess in demand. Okay, if there is too much demand in the market but supply is too low, so market forces will cause the price to go up slowly until you reach at the equilibrium point again. Okay, so I think you can, if you recall, during the month of April or March last year, during the first few months of COVID outbreak, okay, the supply of face mask, okay, I can still remember when people were looking for face mask. Okay, one box that contained 50 pieces of face mask, okay, was sold at around 89 or 90, even up to 100 ringgit per box, meaning okay, around 80 ringgit per box, okay, up to 100 ringgit, meaning one piece of the mask is sold at 2 ringgit per piece. So 50 pieces times 2, okay, it was sold at around 100 ringgit per box. Okay, that was the first few months, the month of April or March last year, because the supply of face mask was very limited. So in that situation, you can imagine that the demand is higher than the demand is higher, but the supply is low. So that's why the price tend to go up. Okay, tend to go up very, very high lah. Okay, so when there is excess demand is high, but the price is too low, then price to start to go up. But now you can see that the price of face mask has dropped very low. Okay, you can get one box of face mask in online or even at Mr. DIY, maybe around 6 ringgit, okay, per box. Okay, from 100 ringgit. Okay, last year now only down to 6 ringgit or 5 ringgit. Sometimes you can even get cheaper online if you import directly from China. Okay, but you compare the price now versus the price 1 year ago. So what happened? That is just the simple interaction between demand and supply. So now when the price was high, so what happened was that many suppliers start to produce a lot of face masks. Okay, and because at the time people are so people want to use masks, okay, everywhere people go, even before the government require face mask is compulsory. So, but because in the market there is not enough face mask available, so that's why the price goes up, because there is excess in demand. But now, because the price, the supply now has increased a lot, supplier has increased production, okay, and people have more options, more producer. Okay, as number of supplier also increase, many people now start to produce face mask. Okay, some people, some business that is not making money, now maybe they want to switch into making face mask. Okay, meaning the number of sellers selling face mask now has also increased. So that lead to increase in supply, and therefore the price now has dropped as low as 5-6 ringgit per box. Okay, so you can see what happened in certain market, especially during COVID-19, during the first few months, and you can compare what happens today. Okay, So that is the interaction between excess supply and excess demand. So you need to know where is excess supply and where is excess demand, and what will happen when you have these two scenarios. Okay, excess supply will cause the price to go down. Excess in demand will cause the price to tend to go up. Okay, so this is the summary of what we learned last Monday and today. Okay, market demand and supply. Okay, so and also between the factors that you see here. Okay, all of these factors that you see here are all related to the shifting in the supply or demand curve. Okay, whether if you're talking about this part, okay, whether the demand curve shifting to the left or shifting to the right. Okay, shifting to the right means increase in demand. Shifting to the left means decrease in demand. Okay, but for supply, okay, any of these factor changes, it will cause the supply to increase. Okay, movement to the right means increase in supply, or movement to the left means decrease in supply. Okay, but if the price that changes, we call it change in quantity demanded or change in quantity supplied. So you need to know if this what factor that can cause the demand to increase or decrease, because this will be very relevant in your multiple choice questions test. Okay. Okay, so so that will be what we have covered so far. Okay, and then we also have this concept of consumer surplus. Okay, of course, this will not be discussed in much detail as long as you know what is the definition of consumer surplus. Okay, because as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to testing your knowledge on this concept of consumer surplus, okay, basically you just need to understand the of course, here you can see how it is calculated using this simple demand and supply diagram. Okay, using the triangle formula, half multiplied by the height multiplied by the width. Okay, multiplied by half, then you get the area of consumer surplus. Okay, whereas for producer surplus is the area below that. Okay, so if you look at this graph here, this part is what we call consumer surplus. Okay, the one in the below, okay, this part is what we call the producer surplus. Okay, so the one in red is the producer surplus, the one in the blue is the consumer surplus. So how do you calculate consumer surplus or producer surplus? If you have this simple demand and supply linear function, you can just calculate the distance between so the tapak or the width multiplied by the height, okay, multiplied by half, then you get this area of triangle lah. Okay, but I do not want to focus on the calculation because usually in the test, but if you were given something like this, you should be able to calculate using the simple triangle formula for area. Okay, but in terms of the definition, CS or consumer surplus is basically the difference between what you are willing to pay versus what you are actually paid. Okay, so for example, if the price of certain good, for example, like the face mask, okay, people are willing to pay up to 100 ringgit last year, okay, because people are, okay, during the first few months of the COVID-19, people are so afraid of the virus. Okay, now people are still afraid, but maybe not as afraid as before, although the number of cases now actually is much higher than last year, but I guess people just get used to the situation. Okay, so last year people are willing to pay up to 100 ringgit, okay, per box of face mask, although the cost to produce may be very, very low. Okay, but now people are not willing to pay that high anymore. That's why the price now has dropped up to 5 ringgit, 6 ringgit per box of face mask. Okay, so CS is basically what you are willing to pay versus what you actually paid. Okay, so if you are willing to pay up to 100 ringgit, but when you go to the market, okay, because there are many suppliers now, the price now has dropped from, let's say, 100 ringgit per box, maybe up to maybe 60 ringgit, okay, maybe during last year. So the difference between 100 ringgit, what you are willing to pay, versus, let's say, you only pay 60 ringgit, that 40 ringgit, 100 minus 60, 40 ringgit is the consumer surplus. Okay, so consumer surplus, you can imagine this concept as being what the higher is the consumer surplus, it will be a benefit to the customer, because you are willing to pay more, but you actually pay less. So the consumer actually gain lah, meaning benefit when you need to pay low lah. So if consumer surplus is very small, meaning that the consumer, we can call it the consumer welfare, okay, kebajikan pelanggan, okay, or the consumer welfare is not very high because you are always pay the high price. But if you can always get the low price, although you are willing to pay high price, so you can say that consumer surplus is high, or in other words, consumer welfare is high lah. Okay, so the same thing as producer surplus. Producer surplus is what the difference between the price seller actually receive, okay, the price received, and the minimum or lowest price which they would have sold the good. So meaning if you're looking from the seller perspective, okay, and you ask the seller, okay, what is the lowest price you are willing to sell this product? So let's say the market price of that product is 10 ringgit. Okay, the selling price is 10 ringgit. But let's say what is the lowest price that you are willing to sell? That maybe only cover your cost, okay, the cost of the product. Maybe the seller will say, okay, the lowest I will go is maybe 4 ringgit. Okay, but the price the seller received 10 ringgit. So 10 minus 4, 6 ringgit. 6 ringgit is the producer surplus lah. You can imagine producer surplus like the profit to the seller. Okay, of course it is not profit, but it's the difference between what they are willing to sell the lowest, okay, but compared to what they actually receive. So the higher amount received compared to what the lowest they are willing to sell, meaning that producer surplus will be higher lah. If the producer surplus becomes small, they are willing to sell 4 ringgit and they can only sell for 5 ringgit, meaning the producer surplus only 1 ringgit lah. Okay, so the smaller the producer surplus, you can imagine also like the seller profit also very small. Okay, so in terms of the concept of consumer surplus versus producer surplus, you can imagine this concept as being the welfare or the benefit to the consumer. Okay, and also the concept here is similar to like the profit to the seller. Okay, of course we're not talking about the actual profit, cost, revenue minus cost. Okay, total revenue minus total cost, that will be the formula for profit. Okay, but the concept of producer surplus is also quite closely related to the concept of profit. Okay, it's just that you need to understand the concept and also the definition. Okay, so I think that will be the coverage for our chapter number 3. Okay, so as I mentioned before, okay, for semester A202, okay, so let me see. Okay, so we will discuss some questions, okay, from the past years. Okay. Okay, so let's do several questions. Okay, so I'm sure you can refer to your test bank which I sent to you before. Okay, to get more examples from chapter number 3. Okay, on the demand and supply. Okay, so okay, for your test number 1, okay, and also perhaps your quiz number 1. So maybe I will do your quiz 1 first, okay, but I will update you on the first test that will cover chapter 1. I think test 1 will be chapter 1 to chapter 4, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, I will get back to you on that, okay. Okay, anyway, okay, so let's look at question number 1 first, okay, and then you can share your answer in the chat group. Okay, so which of the following is consistent with the law of demand? Okay, the answer should be okay, a decrease in the price. So you choose D. A decrease in the price of cakes causes increase in the quantity of cakes demanded. Okay, ceteris paribus. Okay, so this seems to be the best answer, the correct answer. So let's see A, B, and C. Okay, increase in the price of ice cream cause an increase. So of course this is wrong because this is increase and increase. Okay, increase in chocolate bars, no quantity, of course, wrong. Okay, decrease in muffin, decrease in quantity. So C and A almost similar because this one is decrease, this one increase and increase. So I think this is a pretty simple question to answer. Okay, 14. Okay, before that, okay, you can check on your group WhatsApp, okay, the timetable or the schedule, okay, for test 1 until test 4, okay. So I just forwarded into your, in your WhatsApp group. So test 1 will be 10% allocation for the. So if you look at the in your WhatsApp first, okay, 10, 10, 25, 25, meaning 70% in total. Okay, for the test 1 to test 4. Okay, and another 10%, 5% each for the 2 quizzes. So we have 2 quizzes. Okay, so 2 quizzes, 5% each. Okay, 5% each, meaning that will be another 10%. Okay, so the remaining 20% is your group assignment. So that in total 100%. Okay, so quiz, so test 1, week number 5. Okay, on the 16th of April. So that the tentative date will be on the 16th of April, next Friday. Okay, so this week we are expected to finish chapter 3. Okay, next week we are expected to finish chapter 4. Okay, so usually the test will be 1 week after we have finished the last topic of the test. Okay, so we are, so far we are still on the right track. 1 week, 1 chapter. Okay, so next Monday we're going to start on chapter number 4. Okay, and expected to finish by the 8th of April. Okay, so your first test will be scheduled on the 16th. Okay, and the timetable, the time is expected will be around 6 hours. The system will be open. Okay, but the test will be around 1 hour for the test. So once you start answering the test, you must finish within 1 hour of the time. Okay, but the system is open for the next for 6 hours. Okay, so that you can choose the best time and ensure that there is no internet problems during that time. Okay, if you are relying on if your line in your place is not that good, so make sure you go to a place that has good internet connection. Okay, because I do not want to hear students suddenly complaining, okay, I don't have internet, because we provide that 6 hours window so that we can minimize this problem of students coming out and telling, okay, my place has no internet and this and that. Okay, so choose the best time and go to a place where you can ensure that internet connection will be secure and good during that time. Okay, question 14. A recent study found that increase in printer price will reduce the demand for toner. Okay, so I think this is a very simple example. These are complementary goods. Okay, so complementary goods that must be used together. So our last class, I used the example of car accessory and vehicle sale. Okay, so people buy car or vehicle and they go to accessory shop to change their rim, audio system and whatnot. Okay, so and the relationship between complementary good is negative. One goes up, the other one must go down. The price of good of complementary item goes up, the demand for another the good that you want to analyze will reduce lah. Okay, so the increase in the price of printer, so this will be the cost. Okay, this will be the cost. So the effect will be the demand for toner. So we are looking at what happened to the demand for toner. Okay, when the price of the complementary, the cost is the printer price, the effect will be the toner demand. Okay, so if you were to draw the demand curve, okay, so this demand curve is for what? For the printer or for the toner? Okay, if you were to show that the demand curve reduce, okay, or shifting to the left, okay, so what demand curve are you supposed to draw? Demand curve for the toner or the demand curve for the printer? Okay, so you are supposed to draw the demand curve for the toner. Okay, because toner is the effect. Okay, we are not interested. We are not drawing we only interested in the effect graph or diagram. So it will be the demand curve for the toner shifting to the left. Okay, shift to the left meaning the demand will decrease. Okay, so the cost is the printer price. Okay, the curve that we want to illustrate is the effect part. So here is the toner. Okay. Next is number 15. Okay, price of oranges has risen. Which is the following is likely to happen? Okay, again, here you have this concept of quantity supplied versus quantity versus supply. Okay, so if you recall from our example just now in this lecture, okay, in the lecture just now, okay, between demand also we have the change in demand and also change in quantity and change in quantity demanded, the same as change in supply and also change in quantity supplied. So here is the application of that. You're talking about the price of orange. Okay, so the price of orange, you choose what? A, the quantity of oranges. So this is the word quantity supplied. Okay, supplied. Okay, and also for oranges, so this will be the correct answer lah. Okay, C, if you choose, okay, A and D. Okay, so A and D is very similar. Okay, but D is about the supply. Okay, not quantity supplied. Okay, if you're talking about D, you cannot talk about the price of oranges. It must be, let's say, the technology, for example, subsidy. Government gives subsidy to the supplier of oranges. Okay, because the subsidy increase, supply will also increase for orange. Okay, or the supplier, the price of oranges in the future is expected to fall in the future. Okay, when they expect to fall in the future, what will happen now? Supply will increase today. Then D will be correct lah. Okay, but because you're talking about the price of orange, so it will be the quantity supplied. Okay, so you need to know the difference between why A is correct, D is incorrect. Okay, so not just because A is the obvious answer. Okay, D can also be correct if we change this statement slightly. Okay, then 16. Okay, so this is what I just mentioned just now. Okay, so this is about consumer. So you're talking about demand side, okay, not on the supplier side. So you can just use your own logical reasoning. If you expect the price to decrease, okay, are you going to buy now, more now, or less now? Okay, the current demand of the product will decrease, okay, because you will buy more in the future. Okay, because when you have sale in the future, why buy now? Okay, you need to postpone your put on hold, okay, your intention to buy now, so you only buy later lah when the price actually decrease in the future. Okay, so just like if you go to Shopee now, you can see that on the 4th of April, there will be more sale or discount on that day. So you're not going to buy now. You will wait until the 4th of April to buy your whatever items that you want to buy lah. Because at that time you might get more discount, okay, rather than buying today. Okay, so that is what number 16 is lah. Okay, and lastly number 17. Okay, so this one, I think it will be a very simple, straightforward answer. Consumer surplus is the difference between what you are willing to pay and what you actually paid. So 20 minus 5, the obvious answer is 15. Okay, just go back to the definition just now. Okay, and you can get the answer to this. Okay, so for the rest of chapter number 3 questions, okay, go and check past year's question from the internet. You can do on your own, discuss among yourself, or you can use the test bank which I provided to you. Okay, and okay, so I will so check your WhatsApp just now for the test number 1, okay, is expected on the 16th of April. Okay, so it will be a standard, the test time will be standardized for all groups, okay, but you can decide when you want to answer the test. Okay, so I think that's it for today. We'll continue inshallah next Monday for chapter number 4. Okay, so I will upload the lecture as usual in your OL